I would like to also, introduce to you those members of the Chief's Command Staff and those members that were invited that are of Hispanic heritage. Would you please stand, please? Going on to bigger and better things. And thank you. Thank you. These are the incidents and items which reveal a serious deficiency within the present system as it relates to dealing with problems and grievances by minority officers. As far as transfers, Hispanic officers are labeled troublemakers. An officer all set to transfer to a division within his command where bilingual skills are in demand, but he was denied the transfer. The basis for refusing the transfer was that the officer had previously filed a grievance. Why did he file the grievance? Because his seniority rights were violated. He took the grievance through his division. His division refused to go ahead and alleviate the problem. Also took it to Chief Brown. Chief Brown alleviated the problem, brought him back on the day shift. Now he is a troublemaker. In the narcotics division, federal money for overtime was available for Spanish-speaking officers who could listen to drug dealers through wiretaps in order to make cases and make arrests. The Hispanic officers had their shifts changed to avoid paying them, while Anglo, non-Spanish-speaking supervisors submitted for overtime pay. When the officers insisted on the pay, they were soon relieved of their federal court-mandated wire monitoring assignments and eventually transferred out of the narcotics division, 3 each. Bilingual pay, blatant discrimination, no other word for it. From the original compromise in 1985, which our organization took in good faith with the mayor's office and with the city council, to this week passage of a racially biased $75 ordinance, this city administration and leadership has continued to subtle but solid prejudice policies. How can Chief Watson defend this injustice when in August 1990 the chief asked for 250 positions at the rate of $150? These monies were also in the 1991 physical budget. Why $150? Assignment pay falls under a certain section of state law. Every other member, SWAT, bomb squad, helicopters, field training officers, hazardous materials, the ambulance drivers, everybody else gets $150. The bilingual officer is only worth half that much, $75. Maybe we're only going to speak in half sentences. Deputy chiefs. In 1985, there were 4 deputy chief positions vacant. Captain Hiram Contreras was number 3 to be promoted. Through the mayor's intercession, a civilization program was implemented, and therefore the deputy chief positions were all abolished. A lawsuit was filed, and 6 years later, the Texas Supreme Court has ruled by a 7-2 vote that a host of HPD officers, including Captain Contreras, are due promotions. Chief Watson, what is your official position on this issue? Thank the Lord, maybe one day we'll see a Hispanic in your staff, ma'am. Assistant chiefs. In August 1990, the reorganization structure of the command staff was to reflect 11 assistant chief positions. The decision was made to eliminate deputy chief positions, and at that time there were 3 deputy chiefs. Since that time, one of the deputy chiefs retired, leaving a total of 2. The rationale that the chief presented to city council was that this department did not need deputy chiefs. To quote the chief, a deputy chief slows down paperwork by 6 days. It was the chief's recommendation that all deputy chiefs be promoted to assistant chief positions. Currently, there are 2 pending legislative bills in Austin. One bill addresses the appointment of deputy chiefs by the chief of police with city council approval. There no longer exists the need to promote the existing deputy chiefs to the position of assistant chief. Therefore, a new command staff candidates can now reflect the ethnic and racial makeup of our great city. Realistically, the command staff should be composed of 3 blacks, 3 Hispanics, and 5 others. Chief Watson, we are not dictating who you should select as candidates. But for the record, could you please explain to the Black and Hispanic communities why their respective choices of Captain J.R. Jones and Captain H.A. Contreras, the two leading minorities in the police department, are not acceptable to you as prospective candidates and maybe not even groomable? There's a joke going around the department. It's called the Milagro Beanfield Substation. Milagro is miracle. For 2 years, the conditions of the Magnolia Park substation has been deplorable. These conditions have been brought to your attention numerous times. However, you have failed to rectify the problem. There is no excuse for any city employee to work in a work environment such as this. The employers that are assigned to the Magnolia Park substations have been misled that a new facility would be leased 2 years ago. 2 years ago, they were told you will be moving at the end of the month. Chief Watson, how much longer can we expect these officers to be subjected to such cruel and unusual treatment by this administration? Or are we still waiting for that milagro? Affirmative action. The editorial in Friday's May 3rd, 1991, there appeared in the Houston Post, made reference to your affirmative action record. However, the police department statistics reflect different. Minority representation by division. In robbery, managers, 0, supervisors, 0. Auto theft, managers, 0, supervisors, 0. Auto dealers, managers, 0, supervisors, 0. Homicide, managers, 0, 1 supervisor, lieutenant in charge of the Chicano squad. Couldn't find somebody who could speak Spanish. Burglary and theft, managers, 0, supervisors, 0. Target offenders, managers, 1, Captain Contreras, supervisors, 0. Narcotics, managers, 0, supervisors, 0. Vice, managers, 0, supervisors, 0. Juvenile, managers, 0, supervisors, 0. Criminal intelligence, maybe you have to be real smart to get in here because we still don't have any managers or supervisors. Do you consider this the track record of someone committed to affirmative action? And further, do cadet classes starting during this administration reflect the changing demographics of our city? Thank you very much.
There may be some questions from members of the panel.
I have a question for Dave Walker. I have 2 questions, really. One, in your presentation under harsh punishment, under your solution, you say impartial investigation in IAD. I was wondering if you could give an example of what you're talking about, because I don't want to come to my own conclusions about what you're speaking here. And secondly, I'd like for you to speak as to APO's position on the sexual harassment that has been made mention of here today.
Okay, in reference to impartial investigation in IAD, it's the same as what the officers had talked about prior, that when you go to them with, when you have a situation or problem, you are given the maximum. Just like the officers were saying that he was fired in one situation. We have officers that have done the same thing. And I know that you have to use each case and determine by each case, but it has been evident that the magnitude of 2 people punishment is so drastically different. I mean, I feel if you've done something wrong, you should be punished in some manner. But the ultimate of being terminated, and I think it's just impartial treatment through IAD.
Are you saying that IAD is not investigating objectively, or what? Because see, this isn't the first time this has come up. In 1986, the Houston Post did an extensive study on IAD, and the same types of things that we're hearing about today. So I want to make sure that what you're talking about is in line with what was brought about in this report that was done in 1986.
Right, that's exactly what we were talking about. Because we have found that when we're in a substation or we're on patrol, for instance, I'll use myself. When I was in patrol, when my cases came up, and if something happened to me, when you went to IED, it was people that you might have had a confrontation with. It cannot be fair. It's not fair. And we think that it should not be a collaboration on the part of the people that are complaining on you and the people in IED. It's supposed to be an independent investigation, but it's collaboration on a part of those people because, and I don't want to get the impression that everything needs to be black and white, because I really don't feel that way. But I think it should be some fairness there. When you go to IED, the majority of the people that you're being met before are all white officers. When you come to the end of the disciplinary process, they're all white people. I mean, I don't know how you could have, I know you have to use the information and evidence that you've gathered, but there is no sensitivity on the part of minorities when you go to this. It's just cut and dry with you if you're a minority, and that's the way it is. We can sit here and pretend we don't want to accept it and we don't believe it, but it's for real.
Ms. Delaney, may I address that?
My name is Edwards.
Oh, excuse me.
Thank you. That's all
Ms.
right.
Edwards.
That's all right.
We had an incident where a bilingual sergeant was passed over by a pre-selection process that was initiated by the SWAT division. We took it to Chief Brown. It went to Internal Affairs. There was an investigator that was assigned by his white lieutenant. The people that were under investigation found out that the investigator happened to be Hispanic. They went to Internal Affairs, requested that that investigator be removed from the case, which he was, and then the case was unfounded. You know, it's, I guess you could say, objective by omission.
What was the second?
And the second question of sexual harassment, because I think that as a citizen in the community, as a woman in particularly, and I think of the sexual abuse that has happened to women at the hands of HPD, do you think there's a correlation between what happens inside the office and that is permitted and allowed to go on? Is there a connection with what happens on the street?
What?
The mics work. The people just have to speak into the mic and speak up. Thank you, Councilman McGowan, because we want everybody to hear.
I think it is a correlation. I think if, we cannot change the attitude of people, but we can steer them to react in a different way. And I think if you harass the females within the department, then you're going to go out on the street and harass females. And specifically, we have had a lot. The officers that you heard this morning, the 2 officers, is just a few cases of a harassment that we have that it's documented. It's not somebody just saying. Those officers just don't want to come up here and talk before you because they know what's going to happen to them, and we all know what's going to happen to us when we go. But I know I've been at the department for 17 years, and I had trouble when I came here in the 70s, but in the last year I have been through more than I can almost take. So there is retaliation. We like to say it's not, but there's retaliation. And those people, those females, will not come up here and tell you about it. We have documentation on them, and we have lots of cases, not just several cases. But I think it is a correlation. If the officers at the station feel that they can do all these things to females, specifically black females, and I would assure some white females have been harassed too. I don't leave it just as black females. Well, if they can do that there, well, then they feel good about going on the street and they can do what they want to do there. Because we don't complain. We really don't. If you look at the cases that we have, but we cannot get anybody to come forth. And we cannot go out and we cannot even go to Chief Watson and take a lot of cases because the person that's the actual victim won't come forward.
Let's even be more plain about it, and let's take a moment here and not go too fast past these union representatives. Have not you yourself, as president of the Afro-American Police Officers League, suffered retaliation for trying to speak out for black officers?
Yes, I have. Prior to this last year, I had not, of course I was not president this last year. I have gone through a lot of retaliation that I know the other presidents of the organizations have not gone through, and I have made it, I've brought it forth to Chief Dotson. I have gone through the processes. I've written memos. I am beginning to be an expert on writing memos in the last couple of months. So we do go through some serious retaliation. Some can take it and some cannot.
Were you told that for you to speak out on behalf of black officers as AAPOL president, as Mark Clark has, that there's a conflict of interest? Can you explain that comment to me?
Well, I was just told, I was not told in reference to any conflict. I was just told if I had anything to say, I would do it when I got off of work, and I would do it, you know, at my own time. I was asked if it was possible, if a media came to me and asked me about a situation, could I make a statement to it? And I was told, no, I should wait until I get off. And I know for a fact that it's not done with the other organization, but that's okay. If that's the rule, that's the rule. And I'm sure there are rules for me and there are rules for them.
And you currently serve in the community liaison office.
Right.
And has the nature of that office changed? How was that office and what was the purpose of that office when it was originally set up?
Well, I was not there when it was originally set up, but from the information that I've gathered is that office was set up through a city ordinance to be the liaison between the community and directly to the chief's office. And it was basically designed because of black and Hispanic concerns. They felt that they did not have an ear to the chief of police. They had to go through a lot of rhetoric in order to have their concerns heard. So the city council formulated the community liaison office. It was not formulated by any of the chiefs. It went through city council through an ordinance.
And that department is under the leadership of Chief Jimmy Dotson now, isn't it?
Yes.
But who is responsible for day-to-day management of that office?
Well, we now have a female that is the manager, I think the manager of, well, it's kind of difficult to say it because that office has now, I hope I'm explaining it right because no one has really given me the good information. That office has now, community liaison, what I am understanding, is now currently been put under community outreach, which is a new division that has been formulated. And I don't know, I have not been able to get the information if you still have community liaison or if it's just a part of community outreach. I have not been able, since I've been there, to get that answer to that question. I've talked to Chief Dotson's office and I've talked to the manager of our office, and I have not been able to find out, have a liaison been disseminated, or is liaison just one of the functions under community outreach?
Let me make it plain from our perspective and the comments that we have received from various persons in the community. When that department or division or office was originally set up, it was specifically set up to relate to the concerns of African American and Hispanic community people. So we had somebody that could directly approach the chief about the concerns and try to resolve them or translate them to somewhere else. And it worked very well. It was another entry point into the command staff, and particularly the chief's office, that we felt comfortable with. Mamie Garcia, I'm sure Justo knows Mamie very well, was the liaison to the Hispanic community. May Walker was a direct liaison to the African American community. That office has been reorganized. And the former administrative aide for Anthony Hall, Carol Reisler, a white female, was placed in that office. And she now, as I understand the organization chart, is over Mamie Garcia and May Walker. And some of the decisions she has made has been in direct conflict with the way we were comfortable with working in that office. And we have not been able to, at least from our perspective, I know that there are some meetings that have gone on that I've not been a party to, been able to understand what happened and why this was done, and what is the value for it in terms of us. Also, that office, I understand, is being moved from 61 Riesel, which is easily accessible downtown, to somewhere out at a north side, farther out location where it's not easy to have bus service. These are the kinds of, I'm sure there's bus service there, but it's much, much harder to reach. These are the kinds of things that we seem to be doing to ourselves that are distancing the relationship between the community and the police department. And the kinds of things that I know we would like to be reconsidered and reassessed and reevaluated. And finally, I just want to point out one other thing. May, you've had a couple of internal affairs complaints lately yourself. Is that not true?
Right, but I care not to discuss them at this moment.
We'll just say that it seems that all of a sudden when these issues began to surface, and we were working with AAPOL as well in joint partnership, suddenly it seems like there's been a lot of internal affairs activity around President May Walker. But May, we're with you, and we thank you. Cedric Knight.
Yes, I'd just like to make one quick final comment to kind of throw out some stats to the public and the viewing audience to kind of get an overview of what we're dealing with here. Okay. We have what's called a Cohen's report that's produced in-house the department, and in that report, it lists statistical data concerning how many sergeants we have, how many lieutenants, how many captains, so on and so forth, police officers, so on and so forth. So I just like to throw a few bits of tidbit information so you know what we're dealing with in terms of rank and file. Blacks in the department, we have 1 captain, we have 4 lieutenants, we have 44 sergeants, and we have 539 officers. Total somewhere around 595 black officers. Now, Caucasian males, well, first of all, the chief, we have 27 captains. These are the males. We have 120 lieutenants. We have 622 sergeants. Now, mind you, the sergeants are the first-line supervisors who receive complaints from any officer. There are more sergeants than there are black officers, period. And before we can rectify any of these problems, we're going to have to come up with an effective recruiting program where we can become part of the power structure. As long as we're from the outside looking in, we'll never rectify any of this.
You're right. Just before you stay just a second, because I want to look at these stats a little bit more. What we're trying to do is get the command staff and the public officials who are here to understand why it's important when we talk about who and how many people are appointed to the assistant chief and command staff level, why that is so important, and how far backwards we've gone by the numbers. In 1980, according to the 1980 census, African Americans were 18% of the Houston area population. On the Houston Police Department staff, they were 7% of the HPD staff. There was an increase from 7% to 15% of HPD staff by 1990. However, so if you deal with the 1980 census and the 1981 numbers, we were 11% off of our population in the city. Now, however, we are 28%, almost 29% of the city by population. However, the HPD staff is 15%. We've gone from 11% to 14% off the reflection of our population in the city. So while there may be more numbers, percentage-wise, we are much more disproportionate represented in the department now than we were 10 years ago. And the same reality regarding Hispanics as well. The Hispanic population 10 years ago in the city of Houston in 1980 was 17%. The Hispanic representation in the police department was 8%, roughly 9% off. Now, however, there is a 12% representation of Hispanics on the police department. However, the Hispanic population in the city has grown to 26%. Again, 14% differential between our relationship to the department and our population in the community. Why is it and how is it that somehow we're going backwards? You might not even believe it, but we have some more figures that say that in 1987, there were 600 or so black officers on the Houston Police Department. 609. How is it that in 1986 we had 609 black officers and we have about 570 plus officers in 1991? We are going backwards. We've said that over and over again. And then for someone to tell us, well, it's not that important what the color of skin of somebody is, whether or not they are appointed, that's the same old thing. It never was important until we tried to get represented in the departments.
Reverend Boney, could I address that on the assistant
Okay,
chief?
Gusto.
Prior to 1985, the chief did not have the privilege to appoint assistant chiefs. In 1985, the city and the Office of the Chief of Police asked the Afro-American Police Officers League and the Houston Police Organization of Spanish-speaking officers to help him in trying to pass legislation for appointments of assistant chiefs so that we could get representation. We did. The HPOA fought us, the HPPU fought us, everybody, the rednecks over there in West Texas fought us, but we were successful. Okay?
Now hold on just a second, Gusto. I got to add this. One of those same people who fought us was Lieutenant Wunchy, who's the same Hispanic female that's been recommended to receive the benefits of that legislation now by this current chief of police. Is that correct?
That's correct. Now, we're not asking for a handout. We never have asked for a handout. We were at a meeting with the mayor. We were discussing minorities within the department that would be qualified to be effective as assistant chiefs. And she addressed the rest of the Black and Brown Coalition and asked, this is why we need civilization, so that we can go ahead and go out in the community and get some qualified minorities as assistant chiefs in the department. My question to her was, are you saying that of the 1,000 minorities within the department, there is not one that is qualified? The lady blew her stack. Thank you.
Now, there's a few more points here. There's a challenge that we have of understanding. We understand that any administrator who has a political appointment wants to appoint the person of their choice. No problem with that. But it seems like that whenever we are making an effort, the rules of the game always get changed. We were told initially, even before and during the argument for the legislation to allow for appointment of assistant chiefs, no, let them earn it from the ranks. Let them pass the test. Let them work their way up just like anybody else and pass the same test of anybody else. Well, some of our people did that. They passed the test for sergeant. They passed the test for lieutenant. They passed the test for captain. Now it seems that we are told over and over again that the black captain who passed the test with no help, the Hispanic captain who passed the test with no help, the 3 black lieutenants who passed the test with no help are less qualified, unqualified than black sergeants who are promoted over all of them into the ranks of assistant chief. I don't understand that. I don't understand that. And then when opportunities are present, 5 opportunities to promote somebody, we get these same numbers again. And what we're saying as an organization, as members of the National Black United Front in 1991, one won't do. Tokenism will not do. We want direct representation that reflects our community. And this is not aimed at any chief of police or any individual elected official. This goes for mayor and council. This goes for the police department, this goes for the fire department, and if there are black folk on council that don't understand, we got a problem with you too.
Yes, sir.
It's been too long. According to the numbers, we computed the odds of what it would take that with the existing numbers for a black sergeant to become a lieutenant and take the test. The odds are 15 to 1 against whites, just by the numbers. Hispanics against whites, not because when Hispanics take the test, they're not competing just against whites, it's also black officers as well. So we just look at it against other white officers. The odds are 11.3 to 1. Black lieutenants wanted to become captains face odds of 31 to 1 by the numbers. That's assuming that there's no racial discrimination involved, just by the numbers. Hispanic counterparts face odds of 14 to 1. In fact, and when we figure up these figures, let's not include black custodians, blacks on the park police force, because we're looking now at the Houston Police Department in total. That the only area in the Houston Police Department where minorities meet or exceed their 1980 census reputation is in the area of mechanics, janitorial staff, clerical, and sworn personnel killed in duty. That's the sad statistical reality with the Houston Police Department. Now, finally, Mayor, I know I'm holding you up, but there's one more thing I want you to address, and this addresses that question of unequal discipline. AAPOL represented Fitzgerald Colbert and tried to advocate for him in terms of his termination. He was fired by the department days before he was to graduate from the academy for an alleged racial slur and his failure to meet certain concerns on the psychological exams. Could you just speak to that briefly?
Well, I don't want to get off into his case because it's a lot that attributes to that. But basically, he was having a conversation with some other cadets, and somewhere in that conversation, it came out that he did not like white people. Someone else translated that. And he was terminated because of that. And it was a lot of information that was escalated about that. We did some investigation on it, and we found witnesses and all kinds of information that proved that he did not say the things that they said he said. He was merely having a conversation with someone saying, if white people don't like me, well then I don't like them. And we just felt that there was not a good, just reason for firing someone. Of course, we submitted it through the different process that you do at the department, and we were rejected, and we were told by Chief Watson that they would what was determined will continue to be determined. But Colbert is just one of numerous cases that we have presented and have had no success. We have been able to come up with witnesses to show that there was some blatant discrimination and some misinformation involved, and we have not been able to get the department to even investigate those witnesses that we've had. So Colbert was one of the cases that we were not able to do anything with at the police department, and we're going to take the legal process that we need to do with that. And I also would like to bring up another case that had just recently happened, and I know the officer probably don't want me to even talk about this case. I will not give names, but we have one officer that had just finished, and Colbert was the person that was at the end of graduating from academy. And if you really think about it, to send a person through the academy is from 20, I don't know the exact figures, but I'm sure all the administrators here could tell you, but between 28 and 30,000 a year. We've had lots of officers to go completely through that academy, and on the end of the academy are terminated. And another female that is one of our members was just terminated because driving abilities and tactic abilities. And we feel that it was unfair, but of course that officer feels that she needs a job, and she does not want to fight it. But I think that when you spend $30,000 on a person to send them through the academy, and they are a week before graduating, I think consideration can be taken when it comes to just driving and tactical methods, because I think the technical methods that you are taught in that academy are not the tactical methods that you're going to use when you get on that street. I am evidence of it. I have had everything done to me, and the things that I learned in that academy did not stop me from getting beat up, my teeth knocked out, and my hair pulled out, and me shot. So I do not think the tactical procedure that you get in the academy should determine whether you're terminated from the department, and I don't think driving, if you knock down a cone, should be determined why you should be eliminated from the police department, because this particular person is a very sincere person and worked very hard to get through that academy, and was terminated because of those two factors. And I think it's totally ridiculous on the part of the police department. Of course, she did talk to Chief Watson, and she is at the department. We can be thankful for that. But I just think it's really sad that a person is terminated for something of that nature.
I guess you understand why some of us believe that we need a civilian review board to, in fact, do those investigations and reviews of police misconduct.
Jew Don, if I can be allowed to ask one quick question. I know we are due for time. And those of you who can't hear me, I've been in the dentist all morning, so I'm nursing a wisdom tooth here. But I didn't want to rush too quickly through the master police officer plan. And correct me if I'm wrong, and I can't think of the officer's name, but it sounds like an officer is choosing between either a master career plan, a master officer's plan, and a career plan. If he chooses a master plan, are you saying that he cannot go up the career ladder?
No, we're not saying that. The way upward mobility is going to work in the Houston, currently, right now, we only have one system of upward mobility in the Houston Police Department, and that's what we call the administrative track. You take a test, you score high enough, you're selected, you accept a job, and you get the job, okay? Once the Master Police Officer program is implemented, it's going to be like an additional track. It's going to be non-supervisory in nature. In other words, if you want to become a Master Police Officer, you go through certain criteria. And once you meet that criteria and obtain that rank, you will be like maybe an investigator, some type of specialist. You'll be working in a non-supervisory capacity. The whole idea for this concept was because many supervisors don't want to be supervisors. They want the money and they want the status that goes with that thing, whatever you call it, but they didn't want that responsibility. So the Master Police Officer is an additional track. So there will be two tracks once this thing is implemented.
There's some other questions that I don't want to try to take this time up now because they're too complex. But one of the problems that potentially may be in the Master Patrolman is that there have also been some proposals that certain supervisory functions of sergeants be taken and given to officers. Now, if that happens, and Master Patrol officers could take those functions up, as a matter of fact, if that happens, and the number of black people who are in the recruitment pool keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and the number of African-American officers who are taking the promotional exams are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and some of them are bled off into the Master Patrolmen, maybe because of the money and they don't want to take the test, then the number that we're having at the top who are going into the management level track of sergeant, lieutenant, and captain, and that's the way you end up an assistant chief or a chief of police, is also smaller, then we're cutting our own throat. Because in 5 years, many of those African Americans who are, those few that are, captains, lieutenants, are all near retirement age. So there's some further questions that we have to look at and evaluating the impact of that. And this clearly comes up with, I've got to move on to the next panel. I just want to point out 2 points before we go ahead and bring up the command staff and let the police department make their issue. Because I want the public to understand that in the Internal Affairs Division, you have to be a sergeant to investigate the offenses, alleged offenses of other officers. No, general officers don't do that. So if you don't have any black sergeants, you don't really have anybody that's black to be a part of that investigation effort. Plus the fact that lieutenants are the ones who generally coordinate and guide and actually control and coordinate how those investigations are done. We don't have any black lieutenants in IAD. We have only like 3, maybe 4. Captain R.D. Williams is here, sergeants in IAD. And we have a captain over IAD who the black and Hispanic officers are not comfortable with. That is your internal investigating tool, even to this point that the Internal Affairs Division is the chief of police arm to investigate the complaints against other officers. And NIAD is the husband, Sergeant Watson, of Chief Watson. Could that be a conflict of interest? So, I mean, wait a minute. I'm not getting personal, but I'm being honest. Because what you have to understand, if it's not, then fine, I stand corrected, and I've got some, thank you. Good to know that. You've got to understand that the broad context of what some of us in the community have said just ain't so. There's some real reason behind the fears, the uncomfortableness, and most definitely the perception, if not the reality, of broad-based, pervasive, and systematic discrimination and prejudice and oppression in the Houston Police Department. And what we have done today is not call for a march, not call for anybody to resign or be terminated, but do what everybody always says we should do, and that's work through the system and work with the system. And so today, and thanks be to the patience of Chief Watson and the command staff that I'm sure has heard a lot, and because I know I've heard some things that I didn't want to hear, to sit and just listen for a moment. We've never had that chance before. This has been an historic opportunity. Right. And so now we want to do the same. And that's take time and listen to the Houston Police Department. And understand that, because they haven't been prepared, they didn't know everything was good, we don't expect them, unless they choose to respond to any particular issue or every particular issue that we've raised. We want to give the command staff and the chief to respond to what they want to respond to on their agenda and the issues at this time that they want to raise with us and raise before the public. And then our panel will have a few points with them. Then we'll let the Justice Department speak, and we'll go home realizing that it'll be another day before we resolve all the problems in the Houston Police Department. So if you'll just thank these panelists who came forward. Thank you.